to quote Seamus Heaney, he said once to me, he said, "You must sing yourself to where the singing comes from." And I think really that's what informs this picture, the place out of which the music comes. And I think there are a number of references to that that people make throughout the picture. Nuala and myself, when we sat down to make this, wondered, where did the music come from and what informed the players. The world that Iarla Leonard grew up in, 12 children on the top of a mountain, is that world is changing and is probably changed forever. The subsistence farming world of East Clare, where Martin grew up, is a very, very changed place. But yet there's some echo in the music of those places. But like all great music, it's continuous and everything is changing.
Sure.
But is informed by it comes into a new world and has a different function. There was a time when this music was about putting the rhythm under a dancer's foot.
Sure.
Its function was that people danced to it. It was dance music. It wasn't listening music. And there was a brief glimpse of Sean O'Riordan playing the harmonium in a tent in Cooley. I remember that day very well. I was there that day. And also the piece of Tony McMahon. Yeah. That was Sean O'Riordan's funeral. And just behind Tony McMahon, there's Thomas Kinsella, the poet. And sitting next to him is Padre O'Riordan, who is Sean's eldest son. And so all of those things go into some sort of strange weave or mix that enables this music to come out the other end. And this is an interesting time for these islands, and it's a very interesting time in Ireland, post-recession.
Yeah.
And, do we believe what we hear? The music can sometimes, certainly for me, can be very, very eloquent. It can give us some pointers and some insights into where it is we might be going and what is in front of us. At your festival here, the Slayford Mods yesterday, when you look at, the referendum in Scotland, the in-out vote that's going to happen here with regard to the EU, are we looking at the disintegration of the UK or these islands as we have known it and the suite of relationships that are around that? The music can sometimes be incredibly eloquent and insightful in giving us a sensation. And I mean that word, a sensation, as opposed to a fact-driven thing, but just have a sense that things are in flux and turmoil or changing, and that there's some lip service paid to that we need an integrated, diverse, modern society, and what is the music telling us? So some of those things have informed the making of this picture,
right?
Because as Martin says, he really had to play music that displeased his greatest mentor, his father.
Sure,
And many Irish people who have gone away for the purpose of doing that.
Sure.
Writers like O'Casey and Beckett and many, many others have come here or have gone to America to live out the possibility or the dream that they have that just was not or would not be acceptable at home.
Sure. And
people have gone to do that, and sometimes the messages that they send back are empowering and very useful.
And it's all about perspective, I guess, in that scenario.
Sure.
You get to escape the traps and the tradition and all the rest.
Yeah, and it's that strange balance. And I mean, there's a big conversation happening in Ireland just now. So next year will be 2016, 100 years on since 1916, and that was a failed revolution, really. But that was really given impetus and energy by the fact that the leaders were shot. It's a very silly sort of move, but what really informed the business of marking out an Irish identity in the context of empire was a cultural revolution. It was the language, it was Conradh na Gaeilge, it was the GAA in a very significant way. It was the writing of Some people will say Yeats and sing, and Lady Gregory and
Of
the
course.
Abbey, and all that went on with that, and people like Douglas Hyde, and others, who gave sort of, I suppose, after the failure of Parnell. You know what I mean? And Joyce writes about it very eloquently, you know, in Dubliners, you know that.
Yeah, sure.
So the one of the modern eloquent voices in Ireland is music, and is some of this music. It's some rock and roll music, but it's I've always found it to be that if I listen carefully to it, it's Frank Hart used to say that if you want to know the facts, consult a history book. If you want to know what it felt like, ask a singer.
Right,
so I think we're dealing here with feelings and emotions.
Soul, deep soul. That's
Yeah,
how I
yeah,
can
soul.
see it.
It's soul music. Yeah.
So at what stage did you get involved with the Gloaming, or the guys, the five guys? How many of them did you know previously? Or
Well, I sort of knew all of them really, and to varying different degrees. 25 years ago, we made a series for the BBC called "Bringing It All Back Home,"
Sure.
and that was about what happened to our music when it travelled the world, and how did it come back to us in different shapes and in different forms, and so I knew early when he was a small boy, and when he started singing, like that clip of him singing when he was maybe 9 or 10, there, I knew him around that time, and I knew Martin very well, really, in a different context, and I met Thomas Bartlett in New York. I was saying I live in Dingle, and we do a thing called Other Voices in Dingle, which is I suppose a lot of rock and roll music and different sorts of music.
Yeah.
But Glenn Hansard, I was in New York, and we were going to take Other Voices to New York, and Glenn said, "There's a guy you need to meet here," and his name was Thomas Bartlett, and I mean he really is a remarkable player. By any sort of yardstick, whatever, it's his touch really, and he has a sensitivity to time and rhythm and cadence, and there's just something about him that he really inhabits a place deep inside the music.
Absolutely, I find it mesmerising. It's like it's just he gels it.
Yeah, and it's that concentration that he has as well. So I met him, and I didn't really know how well Martin and himself knew each other. I didn't know that story, for example, that how they bumped into each other. I hadn't a clue.
It's like a small town scenario.
That's right. And I knew Martin and Dennis then because they were playing together.
Yeah.
And Queeving, those two clips of Queeving I filmed whenever they were filmed. Tony McMahon, the box player.
Oh right, you filmed yourself back in the day.
Yeah, introduced me to Queeving, and he said, "Here is a remarkable young fiddle player."
Right.
And Queeving is a very special fellow. He went to Trinity, and he's a maths guy. He's a physicist.
Yeah.
And he went all the way with that, and then he apprenticed himself to a pipe maker, and he built a set of pipes, which he plays really, really well, but he doesn't take them out in public.
All right.
And he fell in love with the music of Sliabh Locra. He mentioned Julia Clifford there, and Dennis Murphy. And I mean, for those of you who don't know Irish music, that's like talking about Muddy Waters or B.B. King or Lightning Hopkins or Elmore James or those sorts of
The
people.
royalty too,
Yeah,
isn't it?
sort of. So he went and lived in that place,
Yeah.
and he absorbed entirely that canon of music, and I mean, he knows it intimately. So I mean, he is deeply, deeply knowledgeable, technically, emotionally connected again to the music. So he really is fascinating, and I think that whatever the Gloaming do next, and they're in America just now, and they're thinking of recording a new record.
Right.
I don't know what will be there, but he'll be at the heart of it or not, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very interesting musical journey. The other thing that the Gloaming's music did was many people who never listened to Irish traditional music, when they intuited something when they heard the Gloaming playing, they said they were able to go, "That's mine."
Yeah.
In my generation, when I was growing up, there was a very mixed feeling about Irish music. Um, the language and the music and certain aspects of our sort of cultural baggage were deemed to be sort of uncool, really. They were redolent of failure, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah.
They were redolent of a colonial past, and they marked you out as being sort of a bit different. So, I mean,
Or
you know,
inward looking, anyway,
Yeah.
to some extent.
yeah, and when I mean, you had a thing with Rory Gallagher here yesterday, you know.
Yeah.
So everybody in Ireland came to England or to America to make it.
Sure.
You know, you came here. You know, I remember going to the Marquee Club back in the late 60s and early 70s to see Rory play.
Yeah.
You know, Phil Lynott came over here. That is different now.
Sure.
So there was there's a sort of a, I suppose, a coolness, if you like, about the Gloaming, and some of those tensions were alluded to by Caoimhín
Yeah.
when he said, you know, that some pure traditional people, you know, when they heard Martin playing the tunes and slowing them down, were really quite aghast that he was in some way, you know, fooling around with the music
Yeah.
in a way that was not showing respect to the place from which the music came.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of that. And then at the same by the same token, there was a whole load of people who never heard a set of jigs in their lives. Just went, I've never heard anything like that. But it was the emotional connection. Said that's our thing. That's something to do with us. And there was a sort of a recognition of the virtuosity and a pride in it as well.
Yeah. Sure.
That this was a thing. So, you know, the film came about. I actually can't remember how it came about. We filmed some of it in Cork, some of it in Grouse Lodge, and some of it in a number of different locations.
Was this the early days while they were still writing the album? Or
Yeah, I mean, some of those things were when they were recording it.
Right.
That song that Irla sings early on is that was during the recording of the record, and they were writing that song Saoirse at the time. Saoirse is a poem by Sean O'Riordan, a very famous Irish poet. Raime Shias Mas na Nina, Raime Shias Anocht. And they were putting. So I was there at the heart of the matter,
All right.
really, and from a filmmaking point of view, I think that the key thing, really, is trust.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like almost, you know, you can just ramble around, and that you have a long relationship with these people individually for a long time.
That paid off amazing. So it was a very comfortable environment, I guess.
It was a comfortable environment, and we just worked away. But over the years, you know, I've made films with various different sorts of people. With Elvis Costello, a couple of films, one with him and Burt Bacharach, and one with the Brodsky Quartet called the Juliet Letters,
Right.
and one with Daniel Lanois, where I met him in Dublin, and we just liked each other, and we went to Canada, and he was born in French-speaking Canada, and we had a real connection because his people were fiddle players, and you know, people wouldn't know that about him, but that modality that's in his music and that sense, that sonic sense that he has as well. He's another expeditionary.
Sure.
And so we went on a little expedition from French Canada down to New Orleans, and you know, filmed a lot of music there in similar sorts of circumstances where you're just there and you're knocking around, and there isn't any agenda really, except, you know, we'll talk about the music, and
So you get a freedom.
and let's see what happens. And I think somebody once said, you know, the best music is the music of what happens, that there's a happenstance to it, and when that happens, magic occurs.
Yeah.
And in some of those performances, we were just lucky to get them. You know, that we were
Absolutely.
just there.
Wait, was that shot in the Pepper Canister, or where was that?
No, that's in Cork City,
All right.
and it's an old church, Christ Church, on South Main Street.
Looks
but
beautiful.
When I was growing up, if you were a Catholic, you couldn't go in. It would be a mortal sin. But things are better now, and Just as a kid, I used to walk by that church and I'd say, "Will we go in there?" And my mum said, "No, you can't go in there."
You'll be staying for
Yeah,
life.
but it's a beautiful place. It's the Triskel Art Centre now.
Oh, right, yeah,
and
of course, yeah.
it's a lovely room.
Yeah.
And it's a safe place for music.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good it's a good place for music.
It seemed like a very comfortable environment for them, very warm.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
evocative.
yeah. They really loved it. I mean, I just say big one observation. You know, the cultural capital that's in Ireland, and those rich cultural resources that we have are delicate things. As the country emerges from recession, we will find that, you know, culture and all things that go with it will be leveraged for some sort of an outcome. You know, whether it's a tourism outcome
Naturally, yeah.
or whatever. I think we have to be careful that we don't open cast mine that resource. Artists don't perform and don't work to, you know, to algorithms
Yeah.
that tell us that we're going to have this sort of an outcome or that sort of an outcome. The free spirit is very, very important. And I think that what's at the heart of that film is the excitement and the freedom to create for no other reason than for itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can't be transgressive and different if you're looking for a forecast outcome. And sometimes I think that, you know, with the state's apparatus and the way it relates to culture, we must be careful with that.
Sure.
And because otherwise these things don't continue to occur.
Like commodified, basically,
Yeah.
is what you have to work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, any questions out there for Phil?
Love
Yes,
us.
just there.
Hi.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Philip. I've been noticing of late there's so many more documentaries on bands and on music, or maybe it's always been happening and I missed it. You've done a lot of taking pictures of
Yep.
music and musicians. I suppose I'm just wondering whether the film and the music speak to each other or not, or whether you think making a documentary of the Gloaming impacts on the music at all, or how it's heard or listened, or its future.
I think you make a very valid point. Sometimes, you know, music and pictures are strange bedfellows. There's a tension sometimes between one and the other. But people have always taken photographs, really, one way or another, and our lives for the last 25, 30 years nearly has been a process of taking photographs, really, of moments in music across a whole range of different musics. You know, the ones that are probably dearest to us are the ones that involve the tradition somewhere. That to be in a room with Johnny Leary, or to be in a room with Sean Maguire, the fiddle player, or the singer Paddy Tunney. And, you know, those photographs are now there. And they'll be edited by somebody else into different forms, but there's walls of them in a room. So making the document, I think, is important. Capturing something is important for no other reason than somebody else can open up the box and do something with it. I also think that, you know, to your point, everything changes, and with every new technology, things change. There was a time when if I sat here and I sang a song for you, there would be only one performance. There would be no camera. It would be live, it would be unique, and it would never happen again. That was the way with Irish music. But once Irish music went to America, in particular, I mean here as well, you know.
Sure.
But I mean some of the great recordings here in London, you know, Raymond Rowland, Roger Sherlock, Maggie Barry, Michael Gorman. You could go on, you know, Vincent Campbell, Danny Meehan, all of those people here. But in America there was a pronounced collision with technology, and you know, Michael Coleman, Paddy, all of those fiddle players who went to Chicago and who were recorded in places like Philadelphia, New York and Boston, took music really out of a rural fastness, out of a quiet agricultural Ireland, and it landed, like the blues did when it came up the Mississippi, in a loud, noisy city. And its function changed. The circumstances demanded that it was played in a different way. It was probably played a bit louder, a bit faster, probably in different keys as well. you know, so that it could put the rhythm under the dancer's foot, or it could exist with the noise. Those records were made and they were sent back to Ireland, and we copied what came back because it came from America or it came back from England with some remittance or some check or something attached to it. But everybody went round to the house with the gramophone, wound it up and put it on and found it good. But you're right, and I think there's one other part of the question as well. You know, the minute you walk into a room with a camera, it's different. And that's why the trust thing is absolutely vital. They must actually know that you're really not there. You know, you're there, but so you become part of the apparatus, really. So that they're used to it. And there's no talk about it, really. You just go about your business. You know, you set things up and this, that, and the other. But if the trust exists, then it's not too intrusive, you know. And there's a difference between trust and control as well. You know, if you're making, you know, one sort of a film to a record company's agenda, it's about an outcome. You know, that you wanted to do this, and this. There was no outcome here looked for or sought, which was a lucky place to be, really.
Any other questions? No? What I find about this film and the artists involved in it, we have a program of 15 music docs this festival, and they fit right in the terms of, we were looking for kind of mavericks and outlaws within genres. We had Mavis Staples and we had Seaford Moss, as you mentioned. Have they drawn any flack for that in Ireland or anywhere else? Or,
these lads?
Yes, or the people have moved on and have come to accept this type of, you know, rejuvenation and inspiration that they're kind of trying to inject into old traditions.
I mean, I think it's been enormously successful. You heard Dennis Cahill mention two bands. He mentioned, I think, Deadon and the Bothy Band.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember seeing Planksty in the City Hall in Cork for the first time, 1970, and it was a remarkable moment. It was one of those moments where I said, you know, that's my music. It means something to me in a way that no other music does, because it's from and out of here and is informed by here. I think a generation of people have seen this band and have had the same reaction. Whether they endure, I think they're probably, you know, they've all sorts of things going on, and they all do different things, many different things.
It keeps it fresh.
Yeah,
absolutely,
that's right. And so, like, I mean, the heart of the matter really is the music, does it have integrity? And I think it does, and I think people realise that. They came and played for us in Derry, and it was really a remarkable experience. It couldn't have happened 10 years ago, couldn't have happened 20 years ago, for a whole range of different reasons. But there was a joy and a sort of an uplift and just an effusion of emotion.
A celebration.
And when the music cranked up, and it was remarkable to see it. And you know, it may indicate to me, Diarmuid Ferriter, the historian, and Nuala made a series for RT television some years back called The Limits of Liberty. Right. And I said to Diarmuid, I said, Ireland will be 100 years old in 2021. And he said, yes, but we've an emotional age of 17. He said, it's time for us to grow up. Absolutely. And I think a number of things occurred this year that indicate to us that there might be some possibility of that happening.
Hopefully.
I think that the referendum, I think the home to vote thing, the conscious knowledge that if you sign something and put it in a box, something happens. So there was a sort of a politicization and an understanding of how power works and how you can influence it. And I think running in parallel with that, the music and the writing and the language and the literature are coming to a place that is new, interesting, empowering, entertaining, uplifting and informing.
Great. Well, we'll leave it at that, I think. Thanks a million for coming, explaining the background.
No bother.
This music doc is just the way I like it, short and sweet. It's just beautiful portrait of these guys. All right.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks to you for having us, and for the work that you do here. It's fantastic to see all these music films together, and great good luck.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bring it back to Ireland.
We'll try our best.
Okay.
We're coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.